Chapter 59. Affections and Loyalties. The thick fabric of the tent barely held back the wind descending from the mountains. Each gust pulled at the ropes, set the poles trembling, and raised a constant murmur, low, persistent, as though the entire camp breathed with discomfort. Outside the colossal gates of Kharad-Dûm, the army waited. The walls rose like an impassable boundary, dark, silent, indifferent. There was no sign of movement above, no torchlight, no voices, no indication that the dwarven city had any intention of opening itself to them, only stone, and waiting. Rollum stood beside the central table, slightly bent over the map spread across it. The lines marked upon the parchment showed routes, positions, search areas, but none of them offered answers. Hours had passed, too many. His fingers rested on one of the roads skirting the wall, motionless, as though pressing it might force the world to reveal what it refused to show. The entrance flap was thrown open abruptly, letting in a colder gust than any before it. A soldier stopped a few paces away, rigid, his breathing still unsteady. "My lord." Rollum did not lift his gaze at once. "Speak." "There is still no trace of Commander Riven. His first lieutenant insists he does not know his whereabouts. He says the commander only ordered them to hold position and did not return." Rollum lifted his eyes slowly. They fixed upon the soldier. "Where have you searched?" "In the area around the camp," the man replied without hesitation. "We also sent trackers along the wall, in both directions, north and south, and patrols along the road leading back west, beyond the line of watch." He paused briefly. "There are no signs, my lord." The wind struck the tent again. The silence that followed was not long, but it was enough. Rollum slowly closed his fists, tightening his fingers until the knuckles turned white. "Tracks?" he asked. "None." "Signs of combat?" "No, my lord." "Witnesses?" "No one saw anything." That was what weighed most. Nothing. No struggle, no flight, no mistake. Rollum turned his gaze back toward the map. His jaw tightened. "Keep searching." The soldier nodded. "Yes, my lord." But he did not move. Rollum noticed without needing to look at him. "Something else?" The man hesitated. It was brief, but enough to make itself obvious. "Some of the men," he began, "believe the commander may have—" He stopped. The words seemed heavier than he had expected. Rollum looked up. This time there was no neutrality in his expression. "Say what you have to say." The soldier swallowed. "That he may have deserted." The air inside the tent turned colder, not from the wind, from the way the silence fell after. Rollum took one step toward him. It was not abrupt, but it was enough to make the soldier stiffen. "Is that what you believe?" "No, my lord," he replied at once. "I only repeat what—" "Then limit yourself to doing what you are ordered." He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The tone was enough to close off every other possibility. The soldier lowered his head. "Yes, my lord." He turned quickly and left the tent almost at once, as though remaining a second longer would expose him to something he could not control. The flap closed again. The murmur of the wind returned. Rollum did not move. For several moments he remained completely still, his gaze fixed on the place where the soldier had stood. Then his eyes drifted back to the map, to the walls and to the roads, to the void of information. His hand slowly closed around the cup resting beside the parchment. The metal creaked faintly beneath the pressure of his fingers. An instant, only one. Then he hurled it to the ground with violence. The impact rang through the whole tent. The cup bounced across the stone, spinning once before losing its momentum in the shadows. Rollum drew a deep breath. Once, then again. But it did not calm him. "Damn you, Riven." The warmth of the tavern contrasted sharply with the cold stone outside. The air was thick with smoke, low voices, metal and wood striking somewhere in the back. Nothing shrill, nothing chaotic, only contained life. Riven sat alone at a table apart from the others. He was not watching anyone in particular, but neither did he stop watching. His eyes moved over the room without lingering too long on any face, measuring, weighing, dismissing. A figure came to a stop before him. "Here you are." A dwarven woman set a plate on the table with movements that were firm but careful. Her expression was open, kind, as though routine had not worn away her warmth. Riven gave the slightest nod. "Thank you." He began to eat without haste, but without distraction. The dwarf did not leave. "You do not look like you are from here," she said, resting one hand against the table. "And you do not look like someone enjoying the wait either." Riven did not lift his gaze. "I am not," she smiled. "The gates will open sooner or later. They always do." Riven did not answer. The dwarf studied him for a few seconds more, as though trying to read something beyond his silence. "You have the look of someone who is not worried for himself," she added. "It is someone else." Riven looked up then. There was no annoyance in his expression, but no interest either. "I have no family." The answer was dry, definitive. The dwarf did not seem offended. "That does not mean you have no one," she replied naturally. "There is always someone, even when one refuses to admit it." Riven held her gaze for a moment. "I have only a duty." A brief pause. "My honor." Another. "And my loyalty." The dwarf tilted her head slightly. "That is another kind of bond." Before the silence could turn awkward, another figure approached. "Sora." Seth the innkeeper stopped beside the table, exchanging a glance with her. "Leave him be. Not everyone comes here to talk." Sora smiled without a trace of offense. "I know." She stepped away with ease. "I'm going back to the kitchen." Before leaving, she cast one final glance at Riven. Not inquisitive, only understanding. Then she disappeared into the movement of the room. The innkeeper gave a faint sigh. "Forgive my wife," he said, resting one hand on the back of a chair. "She has a habit of trying to mend troubles that are not hers." Riven shook his head. "It is no trouble." He finished eating before speaking again. "How did you end up married to a dwarf?" The question came plainly, without preamble. Riven paused slightly after asking it. "It is not my intention to offend." The man let out a quiet laugh. "You do not." He leaned more comfortably against the table. "I used to think the same." Riven lifted his eyes. "The same?" "That we were different," Seth replied. "Too different." He made a slight gesture with one hand, indicating the place around them. "I came to this city with that idea fixed in my mind, and then I met her." A smile crossed his face at the mention of Sora. "And it turned out we were not so different after all." Riven said nothing. Seth went on. "In the end, it does not matter whether you are human, dwarf, or anything else. What binds you to someone does not change." He paused briefly. "Affections, loyalties, it is the same for all of us." Silence settled between them. Riven lowered his gaze. He left a few coins on the table. "Thank you." He stood. The innkeeper nodded. "Good luck out there." Riven did not answer. He turned and left the tavern. The cold wrapped around him the moment he crossed the threshold. The murmur of the tavern fell behind him, replaced by the wind moving through the streets of Thar-Zul. Riven walked a few steps with no obvious destination, letting his eyes adjust to the dimmer light outside. Around him, the city kept its pace. Dwarves carrying tools, voices crossing in narrow streets, the distant echo of metal striking metal from some nearby forge. None of it held him. He kept walking. But the words did not remain behind. There are not so many differences. Affections, loyalties. Riven stopped. Only for an instant. His gaze drifted towards some indeterminate point in the street, fixed on nothing in particular, as though the present had ceased to matter, as though something buried long before had forced its way back to the surface. The cold no longer felt the same. The city no longer felt the same, and without realizing it, the memory found him. The table was plain, worn wood, 3 cups, a jug half emptied. Ralim was laughing, not loudly, but with the ease of someone who allows himself to lower his guard. His cup never remained full for long. He raised it, drank, filled it again. His voice occupied more space than the other two. Thorian was not drinking. He held the cup, yes, but had barely touched it. His gaze had drifted toward the nearby fire, as if looking for something that was not there. Riven remained silent. seated with his back straight, without visible tension, without relaxation either. He observed. He did not intervene, as if the scene did not wholly belong to him. It was Thorian who broke the moment. "I am leaving." He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The shift was immediate. Ralum stopped with his cup halfway to his mouth. "What?" Thorian turned his eyes from the fire. "I am leaving Elendor and the army." Silence fell over the table with more weight than any word. Ralum gave a brief, incredulous laugh. "What in the abyss are you talking about?" Thorian looked at him then. There was weariness in his gaze. "The king has changed." Ralum frowned. "He has always been this way." "No," Thorian replied calmly. "Not like this." A pause. Before, there were limits. Riven did not move. He did not speak. Thorian continued, "I will not follow that road any farther." Ralum shook his head. "That is desertion." "It is choosing," Thorian corrected. The fire crackled. "I will go south, perhaps Drowan. Begin again." The word remained suspended in the air. Begin. As though that were something still possible. Thorian laid both hands on the table. "I have cared for the two of you as though you were my own sons." His gaze passed from Ralum to Riven. "And I want what is best for both of you." Ralum tightened his jaw. "This is not what is best." Thorian ignored the comment. "I leave at dawn." He rose to his feet. "If you wish to come, I will be at the castle gates." He watched them for one moment more, as though waiting for something. Nothing came. Thorian turned and left. The sound of his steps faded down the corridor. Ralum remained still for several seconds. Then he released his breath sharply. "What in the abyss was that?" He looked at Riven. "And what do you intend to do?" Riven did not answer at once. He stood. "There is nothing to discuss." Ralum stared at him, disbelieving. "Nothing?" Riven did not look at him. "Nothing?" He turned and left. Ralum remained alone at the table. The fire still burned. The jug remained half full, but the room was no longer the same. Damn it! The memory did not end. It only went on, as though time had progressed without asking permission. The cold was sharper at that hour. Mist covered the road and stretched until sight ceased to be useful. Everything seemed farther away than it truly was. Ralum watched from the shadows, hidden, motionless. His breathing blended with the frozen air, while his eyes remained fixed on the solitary figure before the gates. Thorian waited, standing without moving. Time stretched, slow, unbearable. Ralum did not look away. Will he come? The question repeated itself again and again, and with it, another. And what will I do if he does? His hands closed with force. The mist did not lift. The cold did not ease. The silence was absolute, until the light began to change. The first rays of the sun filtered through the haze, drawing outlines where before there had only been indistinct shapes. Thorian lowered his head slightly. A minimal gesture, but enough. Resignation. He turned. One step, then another. He was going to leave. Then, a silhouette emerged through the fog. Ralum held his breath. Riven. Thorian stopped. Surprise crossed his face, followed by a sincere smile. "I am glad you came." Riven took a few more steps, stopped in front of him. "I have not come to go with you." Thorian's smile faded. He lowered his eyes. "Then you came to say farewell." Before Riven could answer, another voice cut through the mist. "No, Thorian." Cold, authoritative. "We are here to stop an ungrateful traitor." The figure emerged slowly, clad in black, a metal scepter in hand. Galathor. Thorian said nothing. He could not. The sound of footsteps broke the silence. Soldiers emerged from the fog, surrounding him. Thorian let the bag he carried fall. The sound against the stone was dry. He drew his sword. A faint smile touched his face. "A beautiful morning to die." He prepared to move forward, but before he could, Riven stepped between them, sword in hand, firm, unmoving. Thorian looked at him. "Step aside." There was no harshness in his voice, only pain. Riven did not move. "You know I will not." His eyes were cold, empty of doubt. Whatever happens, I will fulfill my duty. A silence. Brief. Enough. Thorian held his gaze for an instant, then lowered his sword. Let it fall. The metal rang against the ground. The soldiers advanced at once. They seized him, dragged him away. Thorian did not resist. Riven sheathed his sword. Galathor stepped closer. Well done, Riven. Riven did not answer. Tharzul did not rest. The sound of metal against stone spread through the city at any hour, constant, rhythmic, like a pulse that never ceased. The streets were full of movement, dwarves carrying tools, merchants haggling in low voices, smoke rising from the forges and disappearing among the stone structures. Riven moved among them without standing out, or so most of them believed. He had crossed the city for days, taverns, smithies, markets, side streets and narrow passages where the light barely reached. He stopped, watched, waited. Nothing. No trace of the group, no clear sign, no mistake. Leaning against the corner of a square, Riven watched the steady movement of people passing before him. He was not simply looking at faces, he was studying them. Postures, rhythms, glances that avoided other glances. He was searching for something out of place, something that stood apart. The bearer of the mark would not pass unnoticed, not in a city like that. And yet, the days had passed, too many. Doubt had begun to force its way in. Perhaps they were no longer there. Riven did not move, not because he believed the search was over, but because he had no way to confirm otherwise. His gaze swept the square once more. And then, something changed. It was not a sound. It was not a clear movement. It was a sensation. Instinct. Riven shifted away from the wall just enough to slip out of direct sight. His body tensed almost imperceptibly as he adjusted his position in shadow. He watched. A figure was moving through the crowd. Tall, black hair, a steady step. His eyes fixed on the cloak before they found the face. Blue, silver embroidery. There was no doubt. The Oracle, Selenia, the same woman he had held prisoner not long before. Riven did not look away. He studied her, every movement, every gesture. She was not alone. At her side walked a well-dressed dwarf, composed in bearing, leaning on a staff. He spoke to her naturally, as though they shared a conversation that did not need to be heard to be understood. Then, a bird descended from above. It landed on Selenia's arm with perfect precision. She did not startle. She raised her arm slightly, bringing her face close to the bird, as though listening to something that belonged beyond the visible world. A faint smile crossed her lips before she let it fly again. The bird rose and vanished among the upper heights of the city. Selenia resumed walking, beside the dwarf, toward the main street. Riven remained motionless, watching, measuring, following them with his eyes as they disappeared into the crowd. There was no doubt it was not chance. It was not an isolated meeting. It was a trail, and this time, a clear one. Riven stepped out of the shadow, without haste, without hesitation, and began to follow them without taking his eyes away.